week, we both kind of went on a rant about LinkedIn and why, in particular, I'm obsessed and use it all the time. You use it a fair amount, Dr. Eloise, I think more for consuming content. You're probably not posting as much as I am, but we talked about some of the annoyances with the platform as well. One of the things that triggered when we were having our conversation is a couple weeks ago now, I think it was on a Monday, you posted your newest iteration of what you call a spider map on LinkedIn. And these posts get a lot of attention. I think they cause quite a stir. And I know some people actually get really pissed. They're like, why are we not on there? That's not fair.
Totally.
So I want to talk about what the heck is this thing? Why? So I have some questions for you, but I want to just initially actually let's do your questions first, and then I want to share my initial feedback when I looked at it and kind of read through the post. So what is this spider map? Let's just start there. Very, very basic. Go back in time.
So the spider map dates back to about 2017, and I was in the process of resetting my career. It had a series of bumps along the way, and part of that reset, I had walked away from ProcureTech for a few years. I was doing procurement and supply chain data science, if you will, maybe quote unquote, maybe not real data science.
Before data science was cool.
Yeah, before data science was cool. And back, I shudder to say this, but I was doing big data, quote unquote, which turned out to be the biggest bust of, I'm not even sure what that was. Anyway, I was a part of it, but doing it for procurement and supply chain. So I'd stepped away from ProcureTech for a couple of years, although it's all threaded back together nicely here in the last couple of years. But what I figured that when IBM bought Antorus and SAP bought Ariba and Coupa came in and sort of matured, I thought, okay, we've solved ProcureTech. Like there's nothing left to be done here.
Box checked.
Box checked, and I'm going to do data science for a couple of years, and then maybe I'll move on and go be a professor somewhere. And what happened in 2017 is we started getting a lot of inbound calls from clients that had, over the last years, from 2010 to 2017, had bought into this vision and said, and they were coming to us and saying, our users aren't using these systems. In fact, they hate the systems. They hate using them. And if you're calling Kearney, I mean, we're not the cheapest firm out there. You're coming with a really complicated problem. And so what I started to research this and realize that absolutely everybody was struggling with this problem. And it's a big, complicated problem. I found pretty quickly you spent $20 million on a source to pay system and nobody's using it. It looks bad. The optics, I mean, it is bad. And so I started
the executive team, right? I mean, that's board level stuff.
Exactly. And so I realized I mean, pretty much every client I talked to, I realized it was the same story over and over and over again. And I'm like, oh my God. So that became the genesis of my reset. And I said, there's got to be a better way, because I'm looking around at these carcasses of source to pay implementations. And at the same time, I'm looking at huge success of AWS, of Salesforce at the time. Now, those have certainly those have evolved or not evolved, but at the time, and we were looking at the emergence of Amazon. Amazon was making it, and still does make it, so simple to purchase, buy, transact, and have full visibility into the buying experience. And it much like for IT, we had this reckoning where, hey, why is this so complex? Why is the corporate IT system so complicated when my iPhone can the iPhone can take me to the moon and back, and I can't even open a website inside the firewall? And so IT had to go through that reconciliation, and in procurement, we had to go through that reconciliation of why is this not like Amazon? And so anyway, I went down the rabbit hole, and then I came out and realized we need a new architecture for procurement. And there's so funny. I realized, and there was I can't find this image, but there was an image of Jira's their they had sort of this platform in the center and interconnected with all these other apps. And it dawned on me that's the future, or at least at the time, the current architecture, what it should be for procurement at a time when it wasn't. And then I realized, oh yeah, that's what Salesforce did. So I kind of quickly moved to this idea that we need a Salesforce for procurement. And the way I visualized it, and maybe in the show notes, we can post the 2017 version of the spider chart. And it had, I don't know, maybe 12 logos on it. And in the middle was this AI hub. It wasn't even fully thought out. It was just, we need a new architecture. And
like the center of the octopus is kind
the
of
center of the octopus. Yeah, exactly. And so there you go. I put it out there. And well, the banks and anybody that was B2C or business to consumer understood this and got on board with this, because they had already doing that on the consumer facing side. But boy, companies that manufacture things and oil and gas, they were not having it. And they're like, nope. And so we kind of got down this. I took a couple of years of advocacy, because what I was showing is that there was all this innovation in procure tech, and compared to all these stodgy source to pay systems. And that was really the crux of what I was showing, is that we need to get away from this old paradigm of source to pay.
So this was 2017, which I don't even know if I've seen the 2017 graphic. So we'll definitely put it in the show notes because I want to look at it as well. How did you decide to iterate and evolve it? Right? It's very, very different now. If I look at the one that you posted, it's overwhelming. I kind of look at it and go, oh my gosh, we have way too much procure tech now. But talk to me about, over the years, how you actually kind of modified and changed the spider map with time.
Yeah, so at first it was just showing that, oh my God, there's all these great startups. I mean, if you think back to when you look at the 2017 version, Scout RFP, which has now been sold to Workday.
That was before there. I remember, side note, I was speaking at the Zycus conference. I was running a women in procurement panel, and we were on a horse-drawn carriage. And we were going to some night event, and somebody pulled up their phone and was like, oh my God, Scout RFP just sold for $500 million to Workday.
Yep.
Like, I just have that evening in my mind.
Yes. I mean, it was truly a monumental moment in procure tech. But what I realized is that, and I'm going to blame consultants and systems integrators here for a minute, because we were perpetuating this idea that there was a best-in-class procurement of source to pay, and that if you just had one system and it was fully integrated, it would solve all of your problems. And that was, I want to say it was the big lie. I don't think it was that deliberate. I just think we got into this group think that said that this is the technology, so let's use it. Because what we realized pretty quickly is that, just take sourcing, for instance, there's a huge difference between sourcing direct materials versus indirect versus services or tail spend. There's all this nuance. And so when you looked at something like Scout that came along, and it could source, you could run a sourcing event in 60 seconds or less. I mean, it was that easy. Whereas for using, I'm going to pick on Ariba, sorry, it would take you, it'd take you training, it would take you days, and it was really hard to figure out. And when I looked at the two, it was like, what is this? Or you looked at Globality that came along, because services was send an Excel file in a sourcing event. And and have the services person fill out this Excel file. It's like, what are we doing here? Whereas Globality came along and they were the OGs of AI, because they were like doing hardcore AI back before there was OpenAI and some of these other innovations. And what they would do was intuit what the user was entering, and then change accordingly. And it was really amazing. And then, so to juxtapose the two, I realized, oh my God, we have got to move to a different way of operating. And so, and then you fast forward to March of 2020, that is when the source to pay construct really broke. That's when because in March of 2020, we took every source to pay process and we tossed them out the window, because we had to get PPE and we had to get hand sanitizer and we had to like just deal with the world. And that's when we figured out that the traditional source to pay construct, it did not meet the moment. And in fact, we did everything to bypass what had been built. And so the spider chart was essentially an articulation. It was an early articulation that we need this different way of operating, and operating in a digital manner that had the flexibility, that had the connectivity amongst all these different capabilities. Because the way we got through 2020 was just a bunch of Excel spreadsheets flying all over the place. And that got us through the moment, but that was not a good way. And so, and of course, naturally, from the get-go, there's been a lot of, back in 2017, there were 100 ProcureTech startups, and I tracked them in an Excel file, and it was pretty easy to do. And I knew all the founders, so I'd call them up and they'd reach out. Now there's thousands of them and billions of dollars in venture capital and private equity money into these ProcureTech. I mean, it's become a whole thing. And yes, the spider chart is headache inducing. And the last thing I'll say is, it's deliberately headache inducing, because my point is every logo that's represented on that spider chart does a capability that procurement may or may not need. Every company gets to choose and make that decision whether or not they need it, but they have to make a conscious, deliberate decision of whether or not they need it or not, because one single suite of technology will not give you that level of precision. And if you really go deep, essentially what I've done in the spider map is, I like to joke that it's the labels, not the logos, is I've deconstructed the procurement process down to the nth degree, or the procurement value chain, which allows us to evaluate whether or not we need all of these capabilities. And so every procurement organization I talk to, I get them to take away this idea that they have to understand that these are the digital capabilities out there, and they need to make a proactive choice of whether or not they want them or not.
And whether or not there's 20 other solutions that say they also solve. One of the things that I struggle with now is when I talk to new solution providers, because I feel like every single week there's a new logo that comes across my LinkedIn or email, and I have never heard of them. I don't know who the CEO is. And I feel like there's a lot of the sameness.
Yes.
So they'll say the same thing, and they're all kind of doing the same thing, but different. And it's almost like we've gone in the reverse direction, where there's too much tech and we need to kind of even out and get more in the middle lane.
Yeah, so I want to be clear. I'm not crowning winners and losers. Yeah. I'm identifying innovation and in the support of procurement building capabilities by adopting these tools or not adopting these tools. There are other companies, there are consultancies that will evaluate these, companies like ProcureTech and even Scout Lab at DPW. They'll help companies, but by ProcureTech, I mean Lance Younger's ProcureTech. They'll help companies evaluate these. What I'm trying to get at, what's the nugget that's unique about this company? And I do it in 2 words. Sometimes I give people 3 words, but trying to distill a startup down to 2 words is really a painful exercise, both for the founder and for me. but it actually gets to the gist. I mean, take any concept and distill it down to 2 words. It's a hard thing to do, but it gets at the essence. And that's why my labels are so important, is because I've actually taken the time to distill something complicated down to 2 words. And as you would expect, all the startups, well, not all of them, what they dislike that I do that, because they'll say, well, we do 10 things. And
We do
yes,
these
it,
XYZ, that all needs to be included as well.
right. But my goal is just sort of pique people's interest about something that's innovative. And I want every company, every enterprise out there to go through the evaluation process. And even if you get help with it, I don't want to, because if there's 10 spend analysis tools and I say, well, this one's the best one. Well, that actually might not be the best one for this company in this region. And so I don't like these generic evaluations, because there's just no way you can know. And so I focus very much on the innovative aspect of the startup.
It's one of my rants with rating sites like G2. Just because there's 5 or 6 reviews doesn't mean that that review is meaningful for you and that's going to be the right solution for you, right?
Exactly.
So how often, because there's so much happening in our industry, how often are you updating this spider map? I mean, it sounds like your goal is awareness around innovation, right? You're not saying pick one or the other. It's the awareness factor. There's a lot of new companies coming into the space, especially I would say in the last, 12 to 18 months. So what's the update process looking like for you?
I tend to do it once a quarter, and it's just, and we can talk more about what my criteria is, but I at a minimum I want to have a one-on-one conversation with founders, and I want to get a demo of the product, and I want to understand what it does and take time with it. I I I I don't get paid to do this. I don't take money or any compensation from anybody, any vendor, anytime. So
I want to make sure that that's really clear, because I have had many people ask me
yeah,
about, oh, well, Dr. Eloise, this must be paid. She must be doing this for compensation. Very, very clear. You are not getting any kickback. There's no money exchanging hands between you and the suppliers.
never. And if there's dinners, I always pay for dinners. I'm like, I don't take swag. I don't take any. If if you hear me exuberant about a tool or a solution, it's because I genuinely love and am excited about what they're doing. I'm a technology nerd as much as a procurement nerd. So if somebody shows me something that blows me away, like, I'm loving it. Like I feature globality, fair market, and Levidata in my first book. It wasn't because nobody paid anything. I would have like not done it if they offered me money. It's just I was so blown away at the time with what they were doing, and I was super impressed. And I mean, I'm in overload right now with the amount of Gen AI solutions coming into the market, which just and I get excited about them. So much like I love content. I love seeing great technology, and so yeah, no, I would never. Not only do I not get I don't get compensated. I don't get paid by anybody, but also Carney. Well, while they probably appreciate that I do it, it's not part of my job description. I do this as a labor of love, and so there. This is just somebody that's passionate about both procurement and technology.
This is the nerd in you coming out.
Totally, and yeah, totally.
How much does the founder play a part in your selection, right? Because there's the whole factor, us marketers, the touch and feel, the personality. How are you separating that versus the tech? Or maybe it's the whole package.
Yeah, so there's a lot of criteria, and it depends on the level of the company, the stage. I tend to look at very early stage. As companies matriculate through their evolution, I become less interested. Not that they're bad or anything, but as you get to the sort of stage C or D, essentially you're getting to scale and exit. And scale and exit startups don't really interest me. And I can't have that much help. I can't help them at that point, and or at least get their message about what they've done that's innovative. And at that point, they're actually not even looking at innovation anymore. They're just grow customer base and exit, and that's good. Like, I'm happy for them, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I tend to focus much early stage because it's just intellectually more interesting. So when it comes to sort of validate, and I'm not going to talk about all my criteria, but some of the main ones are my clients using this? Are my clients evaluating this? Because I listen, and so you can ping me all day and I will answer, but I want to see how this is in the real world. And if clients are, how this is resonating. And there are a few years ago, there were a bunch of blockchain solutions, and I got more confused queries by my clients. And so anybody was doing blockchain, I just told my clients, don't even bother. Don't take the call. So so there's that aspect of it. So one aspect is, how are my clients reacting, engaging with this startup? And that happens very privately, and the startups have no idea who my clients are or who I'm talking to, and I'm very passive about it anyway, because people will react to my spider chart. Like, a client will react and say, oh, and we're evaluating X, or X, company, X. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then in my mind, I'll go sort of file that away. However, that said, there are a lot of early stage startups that reach out to me well in the beginning, before they have clients, and I always engage with them. And so for those, I am betting on the founder. And look, I'm not 100% perfect. Sometimes I put solutions up that don't ever come to market or don't make the grade, and you, over time, you see them just quietly slip off the spider chart, and that's okay. That's part of innovation. Not everything hits. But I do, when I talk to founders that match my level of passion, that I know that they're not going to stop till they get to the end, that actually are talking legitimately and actually are not overblowing with the marketing hype. Because the one thing that I can do is, I have a bull detector that is so finely attenuated that like, I know when somebody's, especially like, for years, people have been coming in AI,
And
but
there's
hey,
the
guess what?
person behind the scenes doing everything.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I know I know what AI, I know the difference. I mean, I just wrote about deep learning and deep reinforcement learning and LLMs and all of this. And like, it's pretty easy for me to tell who's full of nonsense. But at the end of the day, I also, there's sort of a sidebar. I understand what the technology can be a limiting factor. And so people will show me dashboards and sort of SRM type technology, but it's always the same. This is why I hate risk tools, because or most of them, I should say, because it's almost always the same, because it's based on the underlying technology, which is a list of news items, a list of, actually lists. It's charts and graphs and all that. Like, I can predict in my head where the demo is going to go based on what technology they're using, and they'll give me a big spiel. And so like, that does not excite me. But when somebody shows me, hey, here's your Gen AI prompt, and here's a bunch of contracts, and it just extracts them, it's like instantly a light bulb goes off that tickles my brain, and it's like, I've got to know more about that, because that interface is compelling and it's something different. So I know that I wandered there in my response to your question, but like, that's what excites me. And so when founders can convey that, then I'm all in with the founder, and I'm like, let's take the journey. And then I also, then I'll always talk to the founder, and I'll always get a demo, as I said. And then I sort of offer up a trick question, because they all want to, they want to know how we can work together, partner together. And essentially what they're saying is, how can I pay you
Or
to
how can you recommend me to the Kearney Book of Business, Kearney Book of
right,
Business, right?
exactly. And I actually sort of turn it around, and I've gotten good at asking this question before they do that, because I know it's coming, because I mean I've sat through hundreds, if not maybe 1,000 of these now. And I ask if there's anything I can do for them, which is me offering to help them, especially if they're early stage. And how they respond tells me a lot about their character and whether or not I want to put my name and associate my name with them. And so there are just all these just various flags and interactions I have that tell me, do I want to invest sort of my time in this solution, or more specifically in the founder?
So for the solution providers that are listening that have not engaged with you before, let's say that they're not working with any of your current customers, is it fair to say the founder should ping you, reach out on LinkedIn with a case about why they'd like to meet with you, or how should that outreach look if they're not currently on your radar at all and want to be on the radar?
Let's just drop me a note on LinkedIn or an email, or many of them find me at conferences, or I do all. I'm sort of out there a lot, but I respond to in-mail responses, or in-mail on LinkedIn. I respond, interestingly, when I post the spider chart and folks aren't on it, I will get a lot of
Flooded with,
comments.
hey, what about me?
And I do respond, and it takes time, but I go through and I say, okay, give me a demo, let's talk. And so any of those ways, my door is always open, and people can email me, and I will, I'm slow, but I do respond, and I eventually get through them. And there'll be times when I'll just have a week of nothing but these back-to-back calls and demos with founders. And yeah.
Yeah, and I just want to call out again that I think it's important to know that you are offering this. It's not only people that are Kearney customers,
Yeah.
right? So that's not a factor, and that there's no sort of compensation involved. I just want to
Yeah.
spell that out for the fourth time.
And there's no expectation that Carney's going to do anything with this
Yeah.
company. It goes both ways, right? Just because I meet with a startup founder doesn't, and I offer to, do whatever, like do a webinar with them, doesn't mean they're all of a sudden Carney's going to put them into the Carney's book of work either. It's a very low touch kind of thing, and I do it as sort of a professional obligation, more so to the procurement profession, more so than anything else.
So two big takeaways that I noticed on the newest spider map. First is you dropped all the contract lifecycle management solutions. I
Yeah.
don't know if I've ever seen you almost entirely wipe out a category of solution providers. So I have to know why.
By the way, I'm just itching someday to drop all the risk management providers, but that'll be a topic for another day. Um, yeah, this is the first time I've wholesale dropped CLM providers, and I sort of intimated the last couple times I've posted the spider chart that this was coming because of Gen AI. And for those that don't follow me on YouTube, I have a new series, Gen Xer versus Gen AI, and you can find me on YouTube at youtube.com at Dr. Eloise. And you should absolutely, you should absolutely subscribe. But I have that embedded in my brain now from saying it so many times. But my point was, I did a video of me using AI, Gen AI, and I took 10 contracts, threw them into a contract reviewer GPT. This is all like $20 a month, basic. I'm not doing anything
You're on like the
crazy.
version 4, right? The
Yeah,
paid.
version 4, and there's GPTs that are custom domain specific, and there's a ton for contracts. And so I just found one of them. I plunked around with a few of them, but one of them, and this one called Contract Reviewer. And so I took 10 contracts. They were manufacturing contracts, so they were legitimately they full of stuff. I pulled them from an SEC filing database, and I just took 10 contracts, dropped them into this Contract Reviewer, and it allowed me to interrogate those contracts. And then it also created a brand new one. I just said, hey, create a new contract, a manufacturing contract for, with these parameters. And it did it. I did all of this in like 10 minutes, and I know nothing about contracts. And so I was just blown away. And what I realized is if you have Gen AI and a Dropbox or a SharePoint with all your contracts, that's all you really need at a bare minimum. And that's when I realized, why am I wasting time and money on a CLM, on a contract lifecycle management system, when like the whole point of what I need to know from a contract is I need to interrogate multiple contracts across the database. And CLM providers have failed at this miserably, and every one of them, or nearly every one of them. So unless they're doing something with contract analytics, then they got booted. And it's not that I don't love them and not that they're good. I just don't believe in the CLM concept anymore.
Meaning AI is going to replace the need for, let's say, 90% of those solutions.
Right. And it has, or the technology is there. It's $20 a month to open AI. And I know there's security things and blah, blah, blah. Okay. But for $20 a month, I can interrogate thousands of
Or a
contracts.
company can build their own firewall. I mean, a lot of companies are building their own.
Exactly. You exactly. So I've put anybody doing contract analytics on notice. Actually, that was the second part of that message in my note that said, if you're doing contract analytics, you might be the next one's booted, because I can do this in Gen AI.
So another call out or thing that I noticed when I was comparing the newest versus the last version, I counted. I want it. My number is 5. Now I could be off, but there were 5 specific ones that I think like seem to really call out your attention. And I'm gonna try to pronounce them all. Bluebeam.
Yep.
Sligo AI.
I think it's Sligo, but I don't know that for sure.
Okay. Contractify, and that's with a K.
Yeah, Contractify, yeah.
Convergent IS,
Mm-hmm.
and then Simple with a C.
Yep.
So those were 5 new providers that I saw for the first time on this newest iteration. Why these 5? Why did they capture your attention amongst the 100 or so new, innovations in our space?
Right. So, and there are a bunch of new logos from the previous version to this one, and they're all doing interesting things. But what blew me away about these 5 was it's sort of back to like what we were just talking about. Several of these are Gen AI based. So Sligo, I've literally watched this guy build this product using Google Gemini, and it's him and as near as I can figure, a couple of engineers. It's probably more complicated than that, but I've watched this thing develop in like 3 months, maybe 4 months, or I don't know how many months. But the iterations are going so fast, and the power of what he is building is staggering, because this took months, if not years, and I'm watching this, or usually many months or many years, and I'm watching the development cycle go so fast. And I think that's what, and same with Contractify. They came out of Y Combinator, and they're building a new sourcing tool. And when I talk about in me investing my time into founders, like watching these 2 guys develop this out of an idea and how fast they've come to market, it's just because they're building on a Gen AI platform. It's so powerful, and it's awe-inspiring, quite frankly. So those 2 in particular really capture my attention on that.
So So a factor in these five, it sounds like, if I'm hearing you correctly, is the speed to market is unlike anything you've seen because they're building on AI.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that's they're putting like all this AI hype and nonsense. I mean, these two companies in particular, I'm literally watching them bring a product to market in a fraction, like 5% of the time that it's taken historically.
So it
And
it kind of makes me think about what 3D printing has done for prototyping.
mhm,
So my boyfriend is a materials scientist and he works at a lab with, a couple thousand scientists, and one of the things that they would struggle with is getting prototypes.
yes.
You create something and then you have to go to China and it takes 4 or 5 months to get the prototype. Well, then the whole thing's irrelevant and you've got to start over. With their investment in 3D printing, they can get a prototype in the same day.
Yeah.
So I don't know that I just have that analogy in my mind around the speed to market for people who are creators has been just forever changed because of 3D printing. It's similar to these companies where they can go to market within days or weeks instead of years leveraging AI.
And I would take the analogy one step further. You and I could just go rent a 3D printer for a couple hours and do it ourselves and not even have the company that your boy, like we don't have to have thousands of engineers. You and I can do it. Like that's the analogy of we could just do it in our garage. We could buy a 3D printer or there's 3D printing on demand that like the cycle time on this is so quick. It's crazy.
Mhm. So another call out that I noticed is, other than I kind of get a headache because there's so much on there and it's kind of all crunched together, is the very center. I think you like to call it, I call it the center of the octopus, but the center hub, it's super crowded.
Yep.
Like it's just being filled every time. Why is it becoming more crowded and what's going to happen in the center?
Okay, so we're now going to get to the most controversial part. So back in my original iteration, I said there was this concept of an AI hub, and that was because I hadn't really defined it. And over the course of the pandemic, I had to start to define it because all of a sudden everybody started to see themselves as the center of the hub, and I had to get more specific about what did I mean about in that center, what by an AI hub, because within the AI hub is the user experience and then it's also the data foundation and it's the intelligence you create. And and so it's important to understand that we need all three of those things. And so far, not one company has been able to offer those three things. So now I have a feeling that, or not a feeling, I have an argument. Those of you that have read my process orchestration, it's not a manifesto, but it's certainly a why I love process orchestration, or while I'm bullish about it, is essentially what process or this user experience is. It's the same as process orchestration, and it's this ability to be that single interface into all the systems that procurement has. And that's what the Zip, Oro, Level Path, Opstream, Omnia, Tonkian, and
Airbase.
Airbase. I'm forgetting the others, but those companies are building this sort of front door into all of the procurement complexity, because what that's going to do is create a completely different user experience for the business, for the suppliers, for anybody interacting with procurement systems. And I'm so bullish on this because it becomes it's going to become the most important tool in the toolbox, because it's the one that users will never have to leave that interface. If it's done right, users never have to leave that interface.
And when
Now,
we say users, you mean stakeholders?
stakeholders, yeah, or suppliers or procurement individual internal users. What's going to happen is that some of these companies that I listed off are just going to build their own lightweight capabilities. And because you don't need all the heavy or big iron, as one of my colleagues likes to say, of these big, massive systems, when you can just have a lightweight payment system or a lightweight requisition, or you start to get lighter weight individual applications, so you can either integrate to whatever systems you have or just do a lightweight. And I think we're going to find that lightweight is good enough. And so the implications of all of this is that these source to pay providers are they're struggling in terms of keeping up with the technology. They're all literally archaic, and they just haven't made the transition to the modern user experience. And they certainly haven't come into the AI world, no matter how much AI, how many times they put AI in their marketing materials. So we have a long way to go. And I'm not sure well, here's the controversial part. I don't think they're going to make the pivot to the future. And I think everybody that I listed off in the center UX process orchestration bit, they're going to become the most important ones in this paradigm.
So let me just make sure to unpack what I think I heard you say. So the process orchestration systems in the center, and we don't have a list prepared, but I want to say there's like 10 or 12 kind of big players right now in that space, right? Those providers that add some lightweight payment and lightweight sourcing functionality into their platforms, companies may not need to integrate with something like Coupa. This standalone lightweight might be good enough, at least for smaller or mid-sized companies.
Right. And when you consider at a certain point, we have to ask ourselves the question, are we spending too much money on procure tech? Where is the money best used? And that will lead us to some uncomfortable questions, because you can take a source to pay provider and look at the P2P part of that and the procure to pay part of that equation versus the source to contract. And the P2P might be okay. Like, that's okay. But if we're honest, most of the source to contract parts of those equations fall flat, like slip on the banana peel, fall flat on their face, and roll over into a grave. That's kind of what we're talking about with that. So the money is better spent elsewhere. The problem is those companies are big, and
yeah, the rip out is hard. If you're a massive company, it's very political. You made a big investment. To actually rip something out and replace it is tough.
But over time, what's going to happen? I mean, any Ariba customer, like, get ready, because you're not going to have an upgrade in place when SAP finally sunsets Ariba. And so you're going to be confronted with this. MTORS users were confronted with this 7 years ago when IBM shut it down. So like, this is, whether you want to or not, these things are coming to the fore. And even if you want to move to S4 or Oracle procure to pay or whatever, it doesn't even really matter. But that's your system of record. That's your transactional system. That is not the interface you want to give to the end user, because you are going to embarrass yourself and lose all credibility with other executives if you try to claim that an SAP system is as good as what the experience you get on Amazon or your iPhone.
Yeah, I often like to say procurement needs to Amazon. I can't even say it. They need to make the Amazon-like experience for procurement software. And those, you also mentioned it earlier, it's like Salesforce. Salesforce is kind of the hub when you look at sales and marketing tech. Almost every major company, Salesforce is the centerpiece, and then you've got niche software that integrates with it.
And I'll take one step further. Not only do we have to do what you just said, and 100% you got it, and we also need to Netflix it too, in that we need a system that intuits who we are and what our preferences are, or more importantly, what we're likely to do in the system. So this can't just be interface play. It has to be like intelligence has to be embedded in this. And it has to nudge me to the next thing.
Like
And
the Amazon recommendations.
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So Mother's Day is coming up this weekend when we're recording this, and I was doing my last purchase for my mom. I had my dad sneak around the house, and at the bottom, right, there were a couple recommendations popped up nudging me that I never would have thought of. It wasn't in my train of thought, but wow, that's a really good idea. And yeah, maybe I do need to buy that.
Yeah. And yeah, exactly. And so that's what's missing. And if you don't have it today, it's a long way to get there. I mean, that's going to be a long time in coming. The traditional source to pay companies will lose market share faster than they'll be able to build this capability into their legacy tech.
So I feel like another episode is we should just dedicate to process orchestration, because I feel like
100%.
there's so much to unpack around the why, the how, who's succeeding, who's not. Like it sounds like in your mind this is like a game changer for the future of procure tech.
There's no doubt it has to be, because if not, then first of all, this assumes the process orchestration players continue on the path they're going, and they're all on that path. And I think it's great. But at the same time, assuming they go where I predict they're going, then they're meeting procurement where it needs to be, which is lighter weight, simpler, more intelligent, and just following a process because it's a quote unquote best practice is not going to get it done in 2024 or 2025 and beyond. We need to do so much better. And it's not acceptable to give user interfaces that are just terrible. I mean, I have this, I've used this in my presentations. Kearney deployed SAP a couple of years ago, and the interfaces are so horrible, I can't use them. And when you look at the underlying code, it's got Java applets from the early 2000s.
It's like dinosaur technology.
Yeah. And what that conveys to your end users is you hate them, or actually, well, it does that, but it's that you don't respect them. And so if you're hiring somebody that's coming into the organization that is a whiz bang, whatever at Gen AI, or even worse, you're hiring scientists to do top-notch drug discovery or top-notch robotic surgery, building these robot surgeons, and you're treating people with these interfaces that were barely relevant in the early 2000s. I mean, the technology from the 90s, if we really go back far enough. Like that, what does that say about the organization? It's like you're asking these scientists to user. Right, exactly. You're asking scientists or whatever engineers to do procurement's job for them because it's a quote unquote best practice. I'm sorry, that does not hold anymore. And just putting out terrible technology is not good enough. And so I think process orchestration folks are going to be the ones that fix this.
So check out a link in the show notes. We will make sure to include Dr. Eloise's newest iteration of the spider map, which I guess we'll call, what are we in, Q2 of 2024? Yes. We'll have to come up with some more creative names. That's all the time we have today. We are, almost coming up on the hour. Join us next Wednesday for another episode.